Welcome to Context 101. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Good evening. Tonight, we bring you breaking news that could reshape the very foundation of global commerce and American economic policy. In a historic and far-reaching decision, the United States Supreme Court has officially ended the era of broad unilateral tariffs that defined the Trump administration's trade agenda. This ruling marks a dramatic turning point in how America engages with the world economy. The ruling delivered early this morning strikes down the legal foundation that supported years of escalating trade wars. The justices, in a closely watched case, determined that the executive branch had overstepped its authority, fundamentally altering the balance of power between the White House and Congress. This decision dismantles a central pillar of the president's America First economic strategy, sending immediate shockwaves through Washington, Wall Street, and global markets. Investors scrambled to assess the impact, while lawmakers rushed to respond to the new legal landscape. The court's decision directly challenges a president's authority to impose sweeping economic measures by declaring a national emergency. For years, this power allowed the executive branch to bypass Congress and reshape trade policy with the stroke of a pen. For years, American businesses and consumers have faced higher costs, unpredictable supply chains, and uncertainty about the future. Manufacturers struggled with rising prices for raw materials, while families saw the cost of everyday goods climb. Now, with this single sweeping ruling, the landscape of international commerce is set to be redrawn. Companies that once braced for sudden tariff hikes may now find new stability. But the decision also raises urgent questions about the future of American trade, the presidency, and the nation's role in the global economy. The decision could signal the end of the long-running trade war with China and other nations, potentially lowering costs for American families and businesses. Experts say it may open the door to renewed negotiations and a more predictable trading environment, but also warn of new challenges as Congress takes a more active role. Politically, the ruling is a significant check on executive power, forcing the conversation back to Congress. Lawmakers from both parties are now tasked with crafting a new approach to trade, one that balances national security, economic growth, and the interests of American workers. Tonight, we break down what this monumental decision means for you, the economy, and America's place in the world. We'll explore how this shift could affect prices at the store, jobs in your community, and the nation's influence on the global stage. The story begins with a policy that promised to remake American industry, but ended here, at the steps of the Supreme Court. As the dust settles, the nation, and the world, waits to see what comes next in this new era of global trade. To understand today's ruling and its far-reaching implications, we need to take a closer look at the roots of Trump's trade policies and how they shape the current economic landscape. We must revisit the origins of Trump's trade agenda, which was a defining feature of both his campaign and his time in office. From the very beginning, Trump promised to put America first by reshaping the nation's approach to global commerce. Tariffs quickly became a cornerstone of his administration, with sweeping measures aimed at reducing the trade deficit, protecting American industries, and pressuring countries like China to change their trade practices. These tariffs were promoted as a way to revive American manufacturing and create jobs, but they also sparked intense debate. The administration used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA, to bypass Congress and impose tariffs unilaterally. This move was controversial, raising questions about executive power and the proper role of Congress in setting trade policy. This aggressive approach triggered a full-scale trade war. China retaliated with its own tariffs, targeting American goods from soybeans to automobiles. U.S. businesses soon faced higher costs, supply chain disruptions, and uncertainty about the future of global trade. By late 2025, the average tariff rate on American consumers soared to levels not seen since the 1930s, echoing the protectionist era of the Great Depression. Prices on everyday goods rose, and many families felt the pinch at the checkout line. Economists from across the political spectrum agreed that the costs of these tariffs were largely borne by American importers and consumers, fueling inflation and making it harder for families to make ends meet. The ripple effects were felt throughout the economy. The policy's impact was swift and disruptive, adding to the financial strain on households already grappling with rising prices and economic uncertainty. For many, the promise of revitalized industry was overshadowed by the reality of higher costs. The legal battle over these tariffs was inevitable, as businesses and lawmakers challenged the administration's authority and the broader consequences of its trade war. The stage was set for a historic showdown in the courts. Legal challenges began almost immediately after the tariffs were imposed, as the sweeping economic impact sent shockwaves through industries across the country. Business owners, trade associations, and legal experts quickly mobilized, filing lawsuits in federal courts and arguing that the president's actions threatened not just their livelihoods, but the very balance of power in government. American businesses argued the president overstepped his authority, using IEEPA for economic protectionism, rather than true emergencies. They claimed the law was never intended to be a tool for broad economic intervention, and that such sweeping decisions should require congressional approval, not just a presidential declaration. The legal debate quickly became a national conversation, with experts and commentators weighing in on cable news and op-ed pages. Many questioned whether the president's use of emergency powers was justified, or if it set a dangerous precedent for future administrations. Lower courts were divided, with some deferring to executive power and others siding with the plaintiffs. Judges wrestled with complex questions about statutory interpretation, constitutional limits, and the role of the judiciary in checking the executive branch. The Supreme Court agreed to hear the case in fall 2025, with oral arguments revealing skepticism from justices across the spectrum. The courtroom was packed and the nation watched closely as the justices pressed both sides on the limits of presidential power. Chief Justice Roberts and Trump appointees questioned whether the president could unilaterally reshape the economy by declaring an emergency. Their pointed questions signaled deep concern about unchecked executive authority and the potential for abuse. The major questions doctrine became central. Does the executive need clear congressional authorization for actions of vast economic significance? The justices debated whether the president's interpretation of IEEPA was too broad, and if Congress had truly intended to grant such sweeping powers. The stage was set for a landmark ruling on presidential power, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the separation of powers and the future of American democracy. The outcome would define the boundaries of executive authority for generations, shaping how future presidents wield emergency powers and how Congress asserts its own role in governing the nation. This morning, the Supreme Court delivered its 6-3 decision. Chief Justice Roberts, writing for the majority, defended the separation of powers and said the president lacked clear congressional authorization for such sweeping tariffs. The majority included 3 Trump appointees, signaling the ruling was about constitutional principle, not politics. The court emphasized that massive economic actions require explicit permission from Congress. The dissent argued for broader executive authority, but the majority held firm. The ruling narrows how IEEPA can be used for economic purposes. The era of using emergency powers for long-term trade policy is over. The response was immediate and intense. President Trump called the decision a terrible blow and accused the court of undermining America's negotiating power. Democrats hailed the ruling as a victory for the rule of law. Republicans called it a blow to American workers. Internationally, China and the EU welcomed the decision as a chance to stabilize trade relations. Canadian and Mexican leaders saw it as a step toward normalizing North American trade. American business leaders declared victory, saying, "The ruling brings certainty and stability." Not all were pleased. Domestic manufacturers warned of renewed foreign competition and potential job losses. The ruling has split Washington and the business community. The world is watching how America will respond. The end of the tariff era will be felt by nearly every American. Consumers can expect gradual price reductions on imported goods as the hidden tax of tariffs disappears. Businesses relying on imports will see costs drop, potentially leading to lower prices and higher wages. Industries, once protected by tariffs, like steel and solar, now face renewed foreign competition and tough choices. Some regions may see job losses as companies struggle to compete. On a macro level, the ruling is expected to ease inflationary pressures. The Federal Reserve welcomes the move as it seeks price stability. The key question: how quickly will these changes ripple through the economy? The effects will be mixed, but the era of unpredictable tariffs is over. The political consequences are as significant as the economic ones. The ruling delivers a major blow to President Trump and reshapes the balance of power between the White House and Congress. For decades, Congress ceded trade authority to the executive. This ruling reverses that trend. The court sends a clear message: There are limits to unilateral presidential action on major economic issues. The fight over trade policy now shifts to Congress, where new legislation is already being debated. The decision also complicates the narrative that justices always side with the presidents who appoint them. The debate over America's trade future is far from over. It's just moved from the courtroom to the Capitol. The court's ruling changed the venue, not the stakes. Legal experts call this a landmark moment for constitutional law. The decision rests on the separation of powers and the major questions doctrine. Major economic actions require clear congressional approval. Scholars say the ruling limits future presidents' use of emergency powers for long-term policy goals. It signals the court's willingness to check executive overreach, especially when Congress's authority is at stake. The judiciary's legitimacy depends on upholding core constitutional principles. By grounding its decision in the separation of powers, the court reinforces its role as a neutral arbiter. This precedent will shape the use of emergency powers for years to come. Tonight, the U.S. stands at a crossroads. The Supreme Court's decision ends an era of protectionism and opens a new chapter in American trade. For families, it promises relief from rising costs. For businesses, a return to stability. For industries that relied on tariffs, it brings uncertainty and the need for adaptation. The ruling reaffirms that transformative policies must come from Congress, not the executive alone. It calls on lawmakers to debate and legislate a coherent trade vision. The world is watching as America redefines its economic role. The path forward will require leadership and bipartisan cooperation. This is not an end, but a beginning. A chance to build a more stable, prosperous future. Good night.